Welcome to Chapter 3. In this section we will be talking about effects, so I won't cover all the available effects here because some of them are really specific, and I will only cover the most common and most important ones that you will find on almost any synthesizer that comes with effects and stuff that you will most likely actually use, and except equalizer and the compressor, which is here, except these two, I will explain all of them completely. These two I will explain to you as well and as good as I can, but they are really topics for itself because they are a lot involved in mixing and mastering, and there's so much to know about them. I could just create whole courses just for these two. But I will give you a brief introduction and a good fundamental basic understanding of what they do, and of course that you are able to use them, so don't worry. Just as a little introduction speech. And I would actually, I've picked a patch already for us from my set. This is how it sounds without effects. And with a little bit of the filter closed. So let's actually start with reverb in this session, as the title says. So reverb is your number one tool when it comes to creating room. So without, this patch is pretty dry. The only thing that you hear is the tail from the patch itself, from the envelopes. And it's just a short tail. So if we dial in, and let me reset all of the stuff to where it was by default. So let's dial in some reverb. So as you hear, the more we dial in, the more far away the sound seems to be. Right, if I increase this even more, now it's pretty far away. So the amount of reverb is one of the factors that come into play to determine the distance. So if you want your instrument to be stronger, to be more present, to be audible better, especially in the attack, you want to pick values here around this level, because we still have the power and the tail, but if you go up here, it starts to become weaker. So let me first of all explain all these buttons and knobs to you. So size apparently is the size of the room. Let me increase this a little bit so you can hear it better. Versus this. So this sounds almost like we are in a little basement room, while this is a huge soundscape. Listen to the tail. It's a beautiful tail. So the decay button tells you how long it takes for the reverb to fade out. And I don't know why they picked these weird numbers, because like this here, it doesn't mean 8 seconds, I guess. Now 8 seconds are gone and still going. But this is pretty long. By the way, if you do it on the maximum, I think it will be endless. The same goes for delay. You control with the feedback how long it fades out. If you make this to 100, you will hear it forever. Maybe this is not the case here, but it's true for delay. But yeah, this does fade out even slowly. But yeah, the decay is like the tail, and the size is how huge the room sounds. So this is sounds tighter, right? Not a huge space like this. And this is a cool effect, but unfortunately we can't modulate this button. As you see, it has no circle around it, so we can't do this with any modulation. But still, good to know. Then we have pre-delay, and pre-delay is pretty easy to explain. Maybe you can hear it. Maybe you notice something. It basically tells you how long it takes until the reverb kicks in. So with this setting, 200 milliseconds will pass before we hear the delay. Compare this. Here we are already in the delay from the very beginning. And here, it takes some time. And except from personal taste, when you want to use this or not, if a sound source is far away from you, then you will most likely, if the signal finally reaches your ears, hear everything at the same time, the instrument and its reverb tail already. So this is the setting for a song that is far or further away. And pre-delay is actually when you have a player sitting in front of you, for instance. I mean, with the sound, it doesn't quite sound like this because this is a really futuristic synthetic instrument right here. And the room size is on big. But generally, if a player is sitting in front of you and plays a note, let's say a cello player on a cello, and imagine, let's say this is the middle and these are the walls. Then he plays the note, and the sound of him playing the note completely without reverb from the surroundings will reach your ear before the sound has traveled to the wall and then bounced back to your ears, which is the reverb then that you hear. I hope you get that. So there's always the dry signal from the player itself, and then the reverb, the hall that comes back from the walls. And if someone is close to you, or a sound source is close to you, you will hear the raw original sound before you hear the reverb from the surroundings coming back to you. And this is what pre-delay can simulate if you want to have a realistic sound. If not, then you can still use this in a creative way, because maybe you like it that there's some initial delay. Then we have stereo width. I think this is pretty self-explaining. It does affect the stereo width. So if you have good speakers now, or you are on headphones, you should hear that this is now in the middle, not on your left and right ear. Well, technically it is, but it feels like it's in the middle. And this is really wide. If you ask yourself when would you use this, apart from special effects where you want something to sound like this, maybe you have the left and right speaker already occupied by instruments that you have panned left and right, and you have another instrument that you want to have some stereo width from the reverb, but you don't want it to fight against the other instruments on the very edges. So maybe you do something like this, and it's a little bit more well balanced in your mix. But this is really up to you, and there are no hardwired rules. I mean, you could even drench everything in reverb on the sides if you feel so. And then we have damping. And damping, you can imagine, is, first of all, I let you hear it. And without. So this is the default position. And damping is basically, imagine a hall, and an empty hall without everything inside it. Just an empty hall would sound like this. The sound would just travel through. But in reality, in a hall or whatever room you are in, there are obstacles. So there are humans or chairs or instruments, walls, stairs, furniture, stuff like this, depending on the room you are in. And all these objects in a room, if the reverb is passing them by, a little bit of it is getting catched, especially in the high frequencies. And this is what damping simulates. So it simulates the sound. But for you as a sound designer, you can just keep in mind that damping is simply another way to reduce the harshness, the higher frequencies and the higher range. Because this has a really bright tail and this hasn't. If you go too far, of course, you will cut off your tail because there's almost nothing left. So it's not only working on the frequencies, I think it's kind of algorithm based. Yeah. And then you have classical filters, like you know from our filter here. You know, we have this low pass filter which lets pass through the low frequencies, which means it cuts off the highs, and we have the high pass filter which lets through the high pass frequencies, as the name always say, and lets and cuts off the low end. So it's basically the same here. Your input low pass filter is filtering the higher frequencies. This is why it starts at the top at 20,000 hertz, and you can just adjust this to taste. So full sounds like this. If you go down, you'll have a way darker tail. And this filter is only affecting your reverb. It's not working on your patch itself. Your patch is the way you set it up. This only counts for the reverb module. Only for the tail. Even if I make it to this. You still have the low end from the patch here. It's still there. It's just not in the reverb. You see? The patch itself is really unaffected by this. So yeah, this is if you have a reverb and you say this is too bright, or sometimes it sounds too metallic, too harsh, then you can just go down here and find a setting that you like more. And on the other hand, I just reset this, the high pass filter is doing the opposite, so it cuts off your low end. So if you do something like this, you notice there's a lot of low end in the reverb, but if you do this, the reverb is way thinner. So compare this again. Right, so this is a way to take some muddiness out of your mix. If you have reverb on an instrument and is playing in the lower register and creating a lot of dark reverb tail, that is too much. But of course you can also use this in a sound design fashion, just to taste without a specific purpose. Maybe you just want your tail to sound like this, then you can just apply this. And as always, you don't have to use these two. If you apply reverb and you like the sound, you're not forced to play around with this. I'm just saying you can, and this is what they do, but in the end it's up to you. Just do what sounds right to you and fits into your composition. And this is basically how a reverb works. What I would like to try with you now is to simulate a room like I told, and let's take a sample for this. Make this louder. Because this patch actually, I created it, is a hybrid between an analog synthesizer and the sample here. So let's take this off so it sounds without. And do you hear this clicking? Sometimes it clicks. Let me just find out quickly why. Now probably then it's the attack. Like I told you once, if you get clickiness, you can just increase the attack a little bit and then it shouldn't happen. I hope I'm right here. Yeah, it's gone. So it doesn't matter on a full patch, because this here is so loud that you don't hear the clickiness, right? And it's even not bad if it adds some clickiness, because this is a plugged patch. So this was not a mistake. Just if we play with the sample alone, this smooths it a little bit out. So let's add reverb, and what I told you with the pre-delay, so let's add a little bit of pre-delay, and let's make the room smaller. So this sounds more like a small room we are in now. Maybe less damping because tiny room can't have that much obstacles. Whoops. So this sounds like we are pretty close to the source. Doesn't sound super realistic, but you get the idea. And opposite to this, if we create a huge room, so just to show you these two ways of doing this, and most of the time the reverbs that come with synths are good. However, you can buy separate reverb plugins and apply them to your synthesizer from some companies. You will find the exact same buttons there. Most of the time you will have the damping and these filters, you will have pre-delay, you have full decay time, size, all of this. And there are two types of reverbs: algorithm-based reverbs like this one, it simulates a room in real time. And then there's something that's called convolution reverbs. They simulate real rooms, and actually they have recorded real rooms and captured their space information, and the convolution reverb is then simulating this. So convolution is a little bit more realistic when you want to make realistic compositions with real instruments. For synthesizers, it's not necessary unless you just like it more by taste and find it a cool hybrid to use synthesizers on realistic reverbs, so you can experiment if you like that. But any reverb should do the job. In the end, it's just something that you need to like. But so much about reverbs now, and I would say we will move on to the next lesson and talk about delay there.